Let's talk about Bryan Hebert, our away bowler, who will be leading off on lane 23 in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. His seasonal record is 60 and 66 for the season, with a season average of 97.33. His average variance ranges from 96.8 to 100.8. It's Bryan Hebert, second ball right on the head pin, leaving the 5 and the 8 pins. Correct object pin hit for a spare opportunity, but the pins didn't all agree with that. As is Candlepin, Bryan Hebert will start off with a 9-box to start off this 5-game series in our match tonight, this Class D north of the ACST. Bryan Hebert leading off on lane 23 for his second box. The opening ball trails off to the right, taking out the 6, the 9, and the 10 pin. And Bryan Hebert completes the mirror image on the left side, leaving just the center cluster of 6 pins. Bryan Hebert is third in D North Division 4. Bryan will take 4 more for a 6-box, a hard font 6-box after the second frame of the first game. Bryan Hebert is third in D North Division 4. He's ahead of Kevin Martell and trailing Bill Olson and Jonathan Hogan as of January 15th. His high single is 127. His high series is 529. He has 12 strikes, 80 spares, and 67 tens, with a perfect box percentage of 35. Bryan Hebert doesn't connect with the head pin, leaving 6 pins on the deck. Bryan, for a spare, misses the head pin one more time, taking out 1 more for the road. 6 down, 4 up on lane 23, the 1, the 2, the 5, and the 7 pins. Bryan for the 10 box, he's going to take an 8 box. That's going to lead him after 3 boxes, 23. With 2 to go before he sits, and our home bowler Richard Lerman will then take the stage, the proverbial stage, at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. Bryan Hebert has bowled 27 out of 45 games under 100 as of January 15th. Seasonal total pins, 4,380. With Bryan, it's often feast or famine. Sometimes he takes double-digit points, 10 or 12 in a match. Otherwise, he takes between 0 and 4. So feast or famine is definitely the best way to describe that for Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert for his second ball, trying to find that head pin. That will be a spare for Bryan Hebert in the 4th. For an open 33 after 4. Utilizing the brand new scoring system at Leda Lanes. But this scoring system should be fairly familiar to longtime viewers of the show, particularly the ones that I've been putting on. Bryan's at open 33 after 4. Bryan is now filling a spare on lane 23 in Leda Lanes. Bryan off the head pin. Doesn't connect, though. He takes out the 3 and the 9 for the traditional 2-pin half Worcester, filling his spare with 2. Putting at 35 after 4. Bryan for the follow-up for the revenge spare attempt. He takes out all but the 10-pin in a really great pocket shot attempt, and he almost converts, but leaving the 10-pin with a piece of wood. Bryan versus the 10-pin now. Tried to play the wood. The wood wasn't playing back. He'll take a 9-box to sit on 44 after 5. And that will be it for Bryan Hebert's first half. In the meantime, let's talk about Richard Lerman, Class D North Division 2, currently first in that division. He's 96 and 30, an impressive 96 and 30 with a season average of 102.98, with a high single of 144, high series of 560 after 5 games. Richard Lerman's going to start out on lane 23, dropping an awkward 5 pins, leaving the 5, 6, the 5, 7, 8, 9, and 10 pins on lane 23. Not a lot of favorable wood here. Let's see what Richard Lerman can do. Take this shot out. Probably have to connect with the 5-8 of the 5-7 pocket. He takes out the 8 pin and the 8 pin only, leaving the 5, the 7, the 8, and the 10 pins for Mr. Lerman. Bryan Hebert concluded the first half of the first string with 44. See what Richard Lerman can do. Rich Lerman will take a 7-box to open up his first frame of the first game. The opener of everything is a 7. Maybe that's good luck, maybe that's bad luck. We will see. Richard Lerman leads D North Division 2 ahead of Chris Curley, Paul Kravitz, and Ed Sargent as of January 15th. His high single is 144. His high series is 560 with 25 tens, 25 strikes, 70 spares, and 86 tens. Richard Lerman versus the High-Low Jack. This is the WCVB Channel 5 infamous Don Gillis shot, the 1, the 7, and the 10 pin. He missed it on his second ball. Now for the 10 pin, let's see if he can get it. He beans the head pin, the 1 pin, leaving the 7 and the 10 for an 8 box. Putting him at 15 after 2. As he moves to start at the 3rd. So Richard Lerman, 96 and 30 for the season. Season average of 103.0. Leading off on lane 23rd, both bowlers seemingly struggling to find that head pin tonight so far. They seem to be missing wide right occasionally. Dropping 6, the 1, the 4, the 7, and the 9 pins. And look at that spare by Richard Lerman. He very carefully caps the dead wood, taking out the head pin and also careening to take the pins out behind it without hitting too full of a shot. That puts Lerman at 25 open after 3. Putting him in good pacing against Bryan Hebert for his 44 half. Richard Lerman should be in good position for surpassing Bryan at this point if he can keep it up. Another mark would definitely assist in that for an early lead. I emphasize early because it's still only the first game out of 5. Lerman for a spare fill. It's going to be an 8 drop, 8 plus possibly, just 8. It's going to be an 8 fill, putting him at 33 in 3. Let's get a closer look at lane 23 down here. That is a 6-10 split with wood. Hit the correct part of the 6 pin, and he's got it, but he's going to get a field goal. We can't give him 3, but how about 8? But the box is not over, so he's looking at an 8, 9, or 10 box opportunity for Richard Lerman. Let's see what he can do. 8, 9, or 10. That's going to be a 9 box for Richard Lerman. After 4. 42. After 4 for Richard Lerman with 1 to go. Definitely on pace to keep in competitive edge with Bryan Hebert, who had a 44 after 5 boxes the first half. Richard Lerman dropping 7, the 1, the 3, and the 10 pins towards the end of the lane at lane 23. Richard Lerman. Should be an easy spare opportunity. He hits the 1-3 pocket, but he connects a little bit too much to the right of the 1-3 pocket, taking out the 3 and the 10 pins, leaving only the head pin now for a 10 box opportunity. It's going to be a 9 box for Richard Lerman, concluding his first half with a 51 after 5. Putting him up by 7 after 5. Your score update, Richard Lerman 51, Bryan Hebert 44. If you're just tuning in, this is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, a season-long series of one-on-one Candlepin bowling matches between challengers organized into classes and divisions, competing for playoff contention as Bryan Hebert starts off on lane 24 for his second half of the first game. Bryan Hebert still having trouble finding that head pin, veering off to the right again. Taking out the 6, the 9, and the 10, 3 pins down. See what Bryan can do about this. He's right on the pocket this time, but a little bit too much right on the pocket. That's a full shot. And full meaning the ball connects with the pins and goes directly back, taking no pins off to the sides, which is often what you have to do in Candlepin bowling. He's going to take a 9 box, leaving only the 3 pin, putting him at 53 in 6 for Bryan Hebert. Still plenty of boxes left. A mark or 2 will keep him on pace for his average. But he's going to have to probably sneak a couple extra in to keep up with Richard Lerman's blockbuster record for the season, and notably higher average as well. Bryan Hebert dropping 6 for his first ball. Rather awkward array of pins, the 1, the 2, the 7, the 8, and the 10, with wood spliced around the 7 and the 8. Bryan for the spare, right in the pocket, and that is a spare. Wonderful spare right on the pocket, just full enough to take out everything and just enough English to kick over to that all-important 10 pin for the spare. So Bryan Hebert is at 63 after 7, and that 63 is open, I might add. Bryan Hebert now filling that spare on lane 24, and he's right on the pocket. That's going to be more than a 5 drop. That's going to be a 7 drop. 5, 6, and 10 split. That's the setback plus the 6. Oops. Setback plus the 6, as I was saying. Bryan, for an admittedly difficult shot, he takes out 2 of the 3 pins, taking out the 6 and the 10 pin, leaving the 5 pin on the deck. Just the 5 pin now from Mr. Hebert, as he waits for a ball to come back from the ball return on lanes 23 and 24. Leda Lanes has a brand new scoring system in play, courtesy of Cubic AMF. And that will be a 9 box for Bryan Hebert, putting him at 79 after 8 by my watch versus Richard Lerman's 51 after 5. Bowlers at uneven points in the game. At the 5th box, Richard Lerman was at 51 after 5. Bryan Hebert was at 44 after 5. And it looks like the bowlers are briefly just doing a pin clear. That'll give me a moment just to talk about Bryan Hebert and show some stats about him. He's currently 9th in his division. Season record is 60 and 66. He definitely has a strong suit in spares, with 80 spares for the season, by far more than his 12 strikes and his 67 tens. Seasonal total pins, 4380 for Bryan Hebert. We are at Leda Lanes tonight, established in 1959 with 36 all-wood lanes, and as I said, a brand new scoring system that is currently being installed. It's currently installed on lanes 19 through 36. This was where WNDS's Candlepin Stars and Strikes was formerly filmed, on lanes 33 and 34 at Leda Lanes. It is also currently where Candlepin Skins and often Candlepins for Cancer are filmed. In fact, the original lights for Candlepin Stars and Strikes are still up on the ceiling, and they're still powered on. We just powered them on for Candlepin Skins just the other day. New episodes of that will be coming out on Candlepin Corner on YouTube very soon. And it looks like we are just about done our lane maintenance. They were disabling the pin spotter, as well as working out a few things with the automatic scoring, because there was an extra piece of wood in the channel, and per ICBA rules, you have to have only 10 pins with no additional pins when you start out on a box. Needless to say, Bryan Hebert for a strike, a slow-moving strike. The 5 and the 8 pins were the last to fall. They fell slowly, but they did fall. That's an open 89 and 9 for Bryan Hebert Jr. Bryan Hebert Jr., excuse me. For, open 89 after 9. Bryan Hebert on a strike. 2 balls to fill a strike. And he's right in the pocket again. That's an 8 drop. 8 drop for his first ball fill. 1 to go. 97 open. 97 plus whatever he gets on this next 2. Potential for 2 more pins. Oh, and he's just off of it. Looks like he's going to elect that as a foul. So that will be an 8 fill total for 97 and 9 for Bryan Hebert. And we're just going to pause while he corrects that on the score system. Again, brand new score system. The cool thing about the score system is you can perform your own score corrections down here on the screens. You no longer at Leda Lanes have to run up to the front desk and tell them what you got for a score correction, which is less pressure on the staff at Leda and more time for action as soon as, of course, we just figure out the software and all that. That's all. But Bryan Hebert should be sitting at 97 after 9. Looks like they're having some trouble with the score system itself down there, but it's no worries. The score system on the stream is unofficial. The one that does matter is the one that is written. So that's going to be a 9 box for Bryan Hebert, putting him at 106 by my count. Should be 106. They're just kind of talking about it down there just in terms of the score system up on the TV, but doesn't matter too much. The paper copy is the one that is official. The stream copy is also unofficial. Anyways, so Bryan Hebert, first game total, an impressive 106 with a strike and 2 spares. Richard Lerman concluded his first half at 51, and he will now be starting out his second half on lane 24 to see how he can do. Richard Lerman has 25 strikes, 70 spares, and 86 tens as of January 15th. His perfect box percentage is 40. Richard Lerman dropping 8, the 5 and the 7 pins with favorable wood. If he red lines that wood on the 5 pin, I reckon that will take down everything for a spare. Richard Lerman for a potential spare here now on lane 24. Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Redlining that. That's exactly how I predicted it. And that is exactly what happened. Richard Lerman takes a spare for an open 61 after 6. Compare that to Bryan Hebert's closed 53 after 6. Richard Lerman promising marks and delivering marks. He has seasonal total pins of 4,634 as he fills that spare with 6 for 67 in 6. He has only 22 out of his 45 games bowled under 100 as of January 15th. And Richard Lerman for the spare, he's going to not quite take out the left side 4 horsemen, only taking out one of the 4 horsemen, the 2 pins specifically, leaving the 1, the 4, and the 7 pins. Get a better look at that there. The 1, the 4, and the 7 pins for Richard Lerman as he's waiting for a ball to return. Richard Lerman is the leader of total strikes in the D class at 25 strikes. He has the second highest single in the ACST D class at 144. And that will be an 8-box for Richard Lerman, putting him at 75 after 7. Richard Lerman is tied for 5th place high series in D class at 564, and he's tied for 9th place for most 10 boxes at a count of 86 as of January 15th. Richard Lerman's opening ball in lane 24 is to the left of the head pin. This time we are looking at the 4 horsemen right side and the 7 pin with some wood. And by my account, it looks like the 3 pin even slid a little bit. It's going to be an interesting shot for Richard Lerman. 4 horsemen right side plus the 7 pin. Seems to be waiting on a bit of a slow ball return. That's why we have a bit of a delay. We have no pitch clock here, so no worries. No time limits here. Richard Lerman is tied for 7th highest perfect box percentage at 40 for the D class as of January 15th. Richard Lerman recently bowled against Bill Olson on December 22nd, 2023. So I believe this is Richard Lerman's first match of 2024, as he veers a little too much to the right and takes out only the 10 pin for a second ball. Richard Lerman took 10 points to Bill's 4 on December 22nd. He threw a 515. It's an 8-box for Richard Lerman, by the way, putting him at 83 and 8. Richard Lerman threw a 515 series against Bill Olson. His best game was his 5th at a 125. Meanwhile, Richard Lerman's first ball of his 9th box is going to be, looks like it's going to be on the pocket. Favorable 8-drop. It's looking good for Richard Lerman right now. 8-drop with some wood. That wood may be deceptive, though, because it's slightly right of the 3 pin. Let's see what Richard Lerman can do. He will get it. That will be a spare for Richard Lerman at 93, open and 9. This is getting hot. This is compared against Bryan Hebert's 97 and 9 after a strike and an 8 fill. And with a decent fill, Richard Lerman could be taking the game. But that remains to be seen. Let's see how Richard Lerman can now fill that spare after the 9th box, or to complete the 9th box. He's off the head pin to the left. That's going to be a 5 fill. So we are still hot on our heels in terms of who is going to take the first points of the first game. 98 after 9 for Richard Lerman. For the spare, just missing the head pin. If he had taken the head pin just slightly centimeters to the left, that would have been a spare, but it looks like he's going to take a 9 or a 10 box, but that will be the first game for Richard Lerman. Points in his favor. That's a 10 box for Richard Lerman. 108 after 1 to 106 after 1 for Bryan Hebert. And oh boy, that's been quite a decisive game. A competitive game for sure. 108 for Richard Lerman, taking the first game against away bowler Bryan Hebert tonight in our 5-game match series tonight at Leda Lanes, this ACST Class D North January 17th, 2024 match with Bryan Hebert challenging Richard Lerman at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. We are going to now start out the second game. Bryan Hebert on lane 23. Bryan Hebert having some trouble connecting with the head pin, but he had a very nice favorable wood drop, or wood leave, wood fall, whatever you want to call it. Trees falling in the forest. Took out 6 despite missing the head pin. And he just slightly missing the head pin. as Dave Simino calls last call for 50-50 tickets for the Wednesday Night League at Leda Layton's. Lerman, Bryan Hebert taking 2 more out for an 8 box to start out the first box of the second game. Not a whole lot to speak of for this second game so far. It's just 8 after 1 for Bryan Hebert. If you're just tuning in, this is the start of the second game in the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is a Class D North match between Bryan Hebert and Richard Lerman tonight. That's a 7-drop for Bryan Hebert. And it looks like we are once again waiting on the ball return. Seems to be a bit of a showstopper tonight. That happens in Candlepin. We just sometimes have some happy accidents that are technical difficulties, and that's just something we live through. That's all part of the game. So I guess we're just going to be pausing for a little bit about that, and we can, in the meantime, swing back to talking a little bit about Leda Lanes. Opened in 1959, that's about 64 years ago. Leda Lanes is a family-owned and operated Candlepin bowling center located in Nashua, New Hampshire. Founded by the late Edgar and Ray Simino, passed down through Sean Howard, Linda Howard, and Alexis Booley, along with Dave Simino, that's the one you just heard on the mic through my mic, talking about the 50-50 for a league, Matt Susi, Joe Booley, and other countless hardworking folks maintaining a really busy center with tons of leagues, cornhole, birthday party options, and oh yeah, did I mention there's a whole other second bowling alley here? Yes, Leda's Lighthouse, located a short walk across the parking lot. The second building specifically tailored towards glow bowling and birthday parties. Having worked there on the day it opened, I can vouch for its awesome effects, music, and atmosphere you'll encounter when in there. Whether you're 9 or 99, book your next birthday party at Leda's Lighthouse or Leda Lanes. They can accommodate either age and anywhere in between. Leda Lanes' main building features all wood approaches with all wood lanes, along with sensor-based automatic scoring. That scoring software is known as ProScore version 25. Currently, half of the house is equipped with that. It's being removed in favor of the Cubica AMF automatic scoring systems. You may notice that the score tables only feature 3 buttons in the outgoing score system. The new score system is all touchscreen based and is running Red Hat Enterprise Linux, by the way, in case anyone cares to know that deeply. Anyways, a lot of other centers have a button that resets the lane, but at Leda Lanes in the old system, that button is remapped for scoring fouls in ProScore Plus. In the Cubica AMF system, it's not really mapped to anything at the moment, so it's sort of in a transitional period right now. Anyways, Bryan Hebert's second ball of the second frame takes out a few more with 2 left on the deck. 8, 9, or 10 opportunity. It's going to be a 9 box for Bryan Hebert after getting iced by the ball return a little bit. He sits at 17 after 2 here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Leda Lanes, by the way, features 36 lanes, 18 on each side of the house. This is allegedly the original side that we're bowling on tonight, lanes 19 through 36. I think they were renumbered at one point, but before the expansion of Leda Lanes in the 1980s, this was the one and only side of the building that featured, well, anything. This building used to be half as big as it is now. Bryan Hebert drops 7 and 1, left with the 2, 4, and the 5. Just misses to the right a little bit. Doesn't take out anything more. One more ball to go. 7, 8, 9, or 10 box opportunity for Bryan Hebert Jr. And that's going to be a 7 box, putting Bryan Hebert at 24 after 3. And the previous score system at Leda used all the way up to roughly the early 2000s was a computerized but still manual score system that utilized a sort of dot matrix digital screen readout with a much more involved keypad at each score table. I remember using these in the old days in the 90s, and there were definitely a bit more of learning curves to them for sure, compared to CompuScore, which is still often used in a lot of centers. Bryan drops 5, taking 3 more out for the road for his second ball, leaving the 1 and the 2 pins at the end of the deck. And might be just waiting to analyze what he can do there. Yes, he's going for an 8, 9, or 10 box now. He's going to take an 8 box. cooling off a little bit. Bryan sits at 32 after 4 at the moment, with 1 more to go before he sits, before Richard Lerman then takes the stage. Richard Lerman, our home bowler tonight. Bryan Hebert bowls out of Lakeside Lanes in Manchester, New Hampshire. The closest bowling house to Bryan Hebert is actually Peterborough. Bowling Acres. But he bowls out of Lakeside because I believe he has bowled out of Lakeside far more. And Lakeside is where I bowl with Bryan Hebert in a league on Sunday nights. Bryan Hebert is going to not get a spare for his 5th box, leaving only the head pin, the 1 pin, which he's been having some trouble finding tonight. And that's going to be a 9 box for Bryan, a somewhat sleepy 41.5 with nothing but 7s, 8s, and 9s. Not even 10 boxes for Bryan, so hopefully the second half will go better for him, but he's at 41 after 5. Richard Lerman, meanwhile, will be starting out on lane 23 to start out his 2nd game. Richard Lerman's home lanes are Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. That's here. Originally from Malden, Mass., living in Tewksbury, Mass., Richard Lerman graduated from Suffolk University with a degree in finance in 1994. He's married to Robin Horwitz Lerman as he drops 1, 2, 3, 4. He drops 4 pins on lane 23, the left half of the deck. A couple of sleeper pins behind the 4 horsemen right side. Lerman for the spare. He just barely misses the head pin, leaving only the head pin, taking out everything else behind it. It's going to be a 9 or a 10 box opportunity for Richard Lerman now. And a 9 box it will be after 1. 9 after 1 for Lerman. Here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire, this Class D North match on this chilly, chilly evening in Nashua, New Hampshire. Richard Lerman, season average 103.0. His average variance is from 96.2 to 104. Neat. Across his games overall as of January 15th, Richard Lerman drops 7 in his first, taking out 1 more. It is the 2 and the 4 pins for Richard Lerman. With a little bouncy ball, he's going to take a 10 box, a nice pretty 10 reconciliation 10 box for Rich Lerman. That's 19 after 2 for Mr. Lerman here at Leda Lanes, the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Class D North, your station identification if you are just tuning in. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, a series of one-on-one Candlepin matches between challengers organized into classes and divisions competing for playoff contention. Thank you for checking it out. This match between away bowler Bryan Hebert Jr. versus home bowler Richard Lerman. Everyone involved here, from the bowlers to the staff you cannot see around, including all of our spectators here, all appreciate your viewership and interest in this live stream, as well as Candlepin bowling as a whole. Richard Lerman dropping 8 pins, leaving the 5 and the 8 on lane 23 with a piece of wood threading the 5 and the 8. That can mess a lot of bowlers up because you don't necessarily want to hit that piece of wood. Richard Lerman was definitely trying not to hit that, and he took out only the 8 pin, leaving the 5 pin. And now he's going for the 10 box. He will get that 10 box, his second 10 box in a row. That's 29 after 3 for Rich Lerman now. And with a mark or 2, he'll definitely stay on pace with Bryan Hebert and possibly surpass him. So your score update after 3 boxes in the second game. Richard Lerman's at 29. Bryan Hebert is at 24. Right on the head pin, Rich Lerman drops 9, leaving the 5 pin. That was a hammer minus the 9. Really nice first ball. If you live in the area and are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community, before we'll pause on that because Rich has got a spare, taking out the 5 pin for an open 39 in 4. Anyways, if you are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org and click Go Bowling to find your nearest center if you would like to give this unique regional sport a try. As Richard Lerman filling a spare, another similar ball to his previous first ball, which was a 9 drop. This time is an 8 drop, leaving not only the 5, but the 5 and the 10 pins as well in lane 23. This is a difficult shot, a setback right side. He just nicks the 5 pin, but hits it from the right side, so it goes to the left. And the 10 pin is safe in terms of that shot. It is a difficult shot, so I don't blame him for missing it. Tried his best. And now he tries the rest, but he doesn't get the rest. It's going to be a 9-box for Richard Lerman. He's going to sit on 56 after 5 frames against Bryan Hebert's 41 after 5 frames. And that's going to put some pressure on Bryan to really get some marks, at least 1 mark for sure. And just like the last game, he's going to really have to turn on the jets to catch up to Lerman, because when Lerman gets hot, he gets hot based on his average and his positioning overall in the D class, as he is the divisional leader of D North Division 2 ahead of Chris Curley, Paul Kravitz, and Ed Sargent as of January 15th. Bryan Hebert, meanwhile, is sitting at 3rd in D North Division 4 ahead of Kevin Martell and trailing Bill Olson and Jonathan Hogan. Bryan Hebert dropping all but the 5-pin on lane 24 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Bryan Hebert versus the 5-pin. That's going to be a spare. 51 open in 6 for Bryan Hebert now. Remember when I was talking about he's going to have to turn on the jets and get some marks? It looks like he might have heard me somehow, despite me talking very quietly far behind him. But I think he definitely felt the pressure. Bryan Hebert now is filling a spare on lane 24. Crosses his body a little bit too much and missing the head pin to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's going to be a 4 fill for Bryan Hebert. It is a spareable opportunity, albeit a difficult one. Let's see if he can take it out on the pocket, the 1-3 pocket. He does take that 1-3 pocket, but the pins dance around and don't take anything out in the back rows there. The 4, the 7, the 9, the 10 with wood. Now he's going for a 10-box. It's going to be a 9-box. A good out. Good 9-box out. 64 after 7 for Bryan Hebert now. Definitely needed that, but the fill probably could have benefit from a few extra pinfall numbers, but let's see if he can get any more marks out of this. Bryan Hebert had a lot of marks in the first game. Let's see if he can get any more. That's a 7 drop. Head pin wiggling. 1, 4, and 8 pins on the deck. On lane 24, his second ball. This is going to be a spare ball if he can get it. This is going to be an awkward shot, but, well, it starts with hitting pins, and Bryan Hebert didn't exactly hit pins there. The 1, the 4, and the 8 pins are still safe at the moment. Let's see if we can get anything else. Nope, same shot, same miss. Yielding a 7-box after 8 boxes for Bryan Hebert. 71 after 8 for Mr. Hebert. The second, Hebert Jr. Hebert Sr. is sitting right in front of me. An impressive bowler in his own heyday. Almost made the Channel 5 roll-off at least once. He always tells that story. He missed it by just a few pins against some of the big guns. But he has a powerful throw in his own right. He can really throw some hammers when he's on it. Bryan Hebert Jr. definitely keeping that spirit alive. So Bryan Hebert's just clearing a pin from the deck. So yes, we are at Leda Lanes tonight. Here's some stats for Bryan Hebert. So yes, he's currently 9th in his division overall with a season record of 60 and 66. 3rd in D North Division 4 ahead of Kevin Martell. Bryan Hebert now. Looks like he had a bit of a false start on that approach. Takes a step back to retry. The retry throw results in 6 drops. Missing the head pin to the left again with a bit of the crossing his body hit. I remember I've been coaching Bryan a little bit, trying to advise him to maybe slow things down just a little bit on his approach. And that was a good improvement, though he was a little bit too far to the right this time, leaving only the head pin. That's going to be a 9 or a 10 box opportunity for Bryan Hebert on lane 24 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Bryan versus the 1 pin. The 1 pin will win the staring contest for an 80 in 9 for Mr. Hebert. Hebert's first game was a 106, and now he's sitting at 80 after 9. Could definitely use a mark. Strike, most preferably. But let's see what he can do. He misses the head pin again off to the right side, taking out the 3-6 pocket. Taking out 3 pins by the looks of it. Chopping a few more out. There's no mark to speak of here, so it looks like it's not going to be even a 100 game. Potential for a 90 if you can take out the 4 remaining pins on the deck here. So it's not completely hopeless, but it might be a bit more of a certainty that Richard Lerman will take the second game. Ooh, that's going to be a 6-box for Bryan Hebert. That's going to be 86 after 10 for Bryan Hebert, concluding a second game with an 86. 2-game total of 192 for Bryan Hebert as Richard Lerman now steps up to lane 24, who is sitting at a 56 half right now. 1.5 game total of 164 for Richard Lerman. And let's see what Richard Lerman can do on lane 24. Perfect box percentage of 40. Seasonal total pins for Lerman, 46-34. Wow, that first ball was a bit of a misfire. He takes out only the 10 pin in the right corner. Richard Lerman's retry ball is on the pocket. More pins fall, but he's left with the left side check mark. 2, 4, 7, and 5 pins with some wood for a 10 box now. Let's see what he can do. It's going to be, looks like a 9 box. Funny enough, it looks like the pin that was kind of slanted was the one that ended up staying up. That's 65 after 6 for Richard Lerman. Here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Class D North. Good as always to have you along. If you're just tuning in, welcome and thanks for watching. If it's your first time watching a match such as this, I welcome you to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is a Candlepin series in which, sort of like the NFL of 1v1 Candlepin matches, where bowlers compete for playoff contention all through the season. Richard Lerman, for example, is 96-30. Bryan Hebert is 60-66. Both bowlers with positive records, but Richard Lerman is overwhelmingly positive. But that box wasn't necessarily positive. He took a 6 box in the 7th with an ugly 1, 8, 6, and 10 split, I believe, if my memory serves me, before the pin setter cleared that out. So 71 after 7 for Richard Lerman on lane 24. Opening ball off to the right of the head pin again, drops 5, 4 horsemen left side plus the 9 pin on lane 24. Richard Lerman also having some trouble finding the head pin now too, very similar to Bryan Hebert. Odd. It's funny how when one bowler starts making mistakes, the other bowler seems to be monkey see, monkey do sometimes. I don't know. I don't understand what's up with that, but Richard Lerman still chopping wood. That's a 7 box for Richard Lerman, and all of a sudden, this doesn't seem necessarily impossible for Bryan to possibly take the second game, although Richard Lerman would have to have some seriously bad luck in these next 2 frames to not achieve an 86 at the very least. He's at 78 after 8 at the moment. He's got 2 to go. Let's see if he can resolve that issue where he was missing wide right. And it looks like he did. That was a pocket shot on the 1-2, leaving the 6 and the 10 on lane 24. No wood to help him, but a clean shot on the 6 and the 10 pins will equal a spare and possibly the second game. And he hits the 6 pin full. Doesn't go back to get the 10 pin, but that will be the second game for Richard Lerman with a guaranteed 9 box and possibly a 10 box. So we're looking at an 87 or an 88 at this point. That will be the second game. That's a 10 box for an 88 in 9 for Richard Lerman. That is the second game right there. And now it's just gravy for Richard Lerman, who took the first game already, and he's taking the second game, and now he's just piling up some additional bonus points to try to make sure he can maintain the all-important 4 points for the total by the end of the 5th game, which will be awarded then. Richard Lerman dropping 6, leaving the 4 horsemen left side this time. A hit on the 1-2 pocket will take this out. Well, that was certainly a hit on the 1 and the 2 pins, but I wouldn't exactly call it the 1-2 pocket. So he took out 2 of the 4 horsemen, leaving the 4 and the 7 pins. On lane 24, in lead lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire, you are watching Richard Lerman, the home bowler, challenging Bryan Hebert Jr. for his final box at the 10th frame of the second game of this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. That will be a 10 box for Richard Lerman, putting him at 98 in the 10th box. Richard Lerman, again, will take the second game. He was already a lock as of the 9th frame by that point, and now he's at 98 after 10. So to recap, Richard Lerman threw a 108 in the first game. Bryan Hebert threw a 106 in the second game. Richard Lerman throws a 98 in the first game and an 86 for Bryan Hebert. Excuse me. In the second game, Richard Lerman threw a 98 in the second game, and Bryan Hebert threw an 86 in the second game for a 2-game total for Bryan Hebert of 192. 2-game total for Richard Lerman, 206. I just have a few folks in the audience. We seem to have an ever-increasing audience gathering around me. My apologies. Got a little distracted while some folks were just moving around. Anyway, so Bryan Hebert's going to start on lane 23 here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Bryan Hebert in the hunt for a wild card spot is at the top of the D North Conference when factoring out the divisional leaders as of January 15th. Bryan Hebert dropping 5, 4 horsemen right side plus the 8-pin. For a spare opportunity. He takes out everything but the 3-pin, and that was definitely the right way to hit it, but I think he probably just threw the ball a little bit too full on that head pin. Let's see what he can do. That's going to be a 10-box for Bryan Hebert to start out the third game. So it was 192 to 206 as of the second game, and now we are going to move on to the third game. Bryan Hebert takes a 10-box. 10 after 1 for 10 in the third game for Bryan Hebert. On lane 23, his first ball careens to the right. That's a similar ball that I saw Richard Lerman throw, where he takes out only the 10-pin. Bryan Hebert is 5th in most spares in the D class with a count of 80 as of January 15th. Recently, Bryan Hebert faced Alex Patton on January 14th at Lakeside Lanes in Manchester, New Hampshire. As Bryan Hebert for the spare, he hits the pocket. Pins are still falling. The 7 and the 8 with wood. Favorable wood, I might add. Oops. Look at that 7 and 8, but there's a double buffered piece of wood there. I don't know how that's going to go. Yep, I had a feeling it was going to take one or none, but that's a 9-box for Bryan Hebert. That's 19 after 2 in the third game. Anyways, Bryan Hebert on January 14th was against Alex Patton at Lakeside Lanes. He took 4 points to Alex's 10. Hebert rolled 472 to Alex's 496. He really struggled to reach the hundreds till the 4th and 5th games, where he rolled a 103 and 105. Hebert, first ball, misses to the right. Takes out one of the 4 horsemen left side, leaving the 1, the 4, the 7, and the 9 pins on lane 23. On January 2nd, Bryan Hebert faced Chris Curley. Curley took 10 points with a 486 series. Hebert took 4 points with a 483 series. It was a slugfest. It came down to the last box in terms of total and the 5th game against those 2 bowlers. Hebert will take a 7-box for 26 after 3. Starting out strong, but starting to diminish just a little bit. And prior to that, Bryan Hebert bowled Ed Sargent in match 8. He took 12 points to Ed's 2 for a 494 series. He had 281 games in the 2nd and 5th strings. The other 3 games were over 100 for 106, 114, and 112. Bryan Hebert again missing wide right on his first ball. On the second ball, he makes a slight correction, but still having some trouble finding that head pin. He's left with 6 pins on the deck, 4 down, 6 up. His home lanes are Lakeside Lanes in Manchester, New Hampshire, though Bowling Acres Grill in Peterborough, New Hampshire is closer to him. He lives in Rindge, New Hampshire. Bryan Hebert for the 10-box. Ooh, that's going to be a 4-box? Oof, that's going to be a 4-box for 32 in 4 by the looks of it. Did I miss something? It looks like actually he had a 9-box in the third. My apologies. Just looking up at the automatic scoreboard, and I'm going to keep in sync with that for now. He drops 8, leaving the 5 and the 10 pins on the deck. What's it going to be on lane 23 for a spare? He's going to bean the 5 pin and leave the 9 pin. For the 10-box, he's going to take a 9-box, sitting on a 41.5. Sitting on a 41.5 for Bryan Hebert, as Rich Lerman now stands up to the approach. On lane 23 at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. If you're just tuning in, this is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour Class D North match between divisional leader Richard Lerman against Bryan Hebert, who is in the hunt for a wildcard spot. Richard Lerman starting out on lane 23, again missing off to the wide right into the abyss that is the 6-9-10 pocket, taking out the 6, 9, and the 10 for 3 pins in the first ball. Taking out a few more pins in his second ball. He goes to the left and a little bit too much to the left, leaving the 1, the 3, the 4, and the 7 pins left on the deck for Lerman. 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 now. He's going to take an 8 box to start out his third game. 8 after 1 for Lerman. Lerman, who bowls out of Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. That's where we are tonight. This is his home turf. This is a home game for Richard Lerman, who is 96 and 30 for the season. Starting on lane 23, first ball on the pocket, taking out 8, maybe more. Nope, just 8. It's going to be the 2 and the 4 pins on lane 23. For a spare now. Lane 23, Rich Lerman. He let that ball escape his hand, looks like. He misses to the left, hits the piece of wood that is behind those 2 pins. 8, 9, or 10 box opportunity now for Richard Lerman, who averages 103 for the season up to this point. That's going to be a 9 box for Richard Lerman. He has the second best average in the D class. Across all of his matches so far, he has an average range of 96.2 all the way up to 104.0. He's ahead of Chris Curley, Paul Kravitz, and Ed Sargent as of January 15th in the D class. He's dropping 5, 4 horsemen left side in the 9 pin, remaining on the deck for a spare. Potential spare opportunity here with a piece of wood behind the 1 and the 2 pin. This might be in the bag for Rich if he could just connect to the right pins. Will that go? That is a spare. Precisely as we drew it up in the playbook. That's 27 after 3 for Rich Lerman now. And that 27 is open after the third. Bryan Hebert has 41 after 5. Richard Lerman has bowled 22 out of 45 games under 100. Across the season, that's not a bad ratio, as he fills that spare with 8. The 9 and the 7 pins left on the deck. Difficult shot, difficult spare. He opted for the pins, taking out the 7 with against the wood. No trick shot there. Only the 9 pin left on the deck for Richard Lerman now. On lane 23, Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. It's going to be a 9 box for Mr. Lerman, putting him at 44 after 4. And at this point, he has taken the game lead by 3 before he's even gotten to the 5th box. So definitely on pace. That spare and 8 fill put him in good standing for sure. To start out his 5th box, he hits the pocket. He's dropping, the 7 pin fell. That was a good thing because that 6 and 10 pin spread against the 7 pin wouldn't have been a very easy spare, but now he's looking at just a 6-10 spare opportunity on lane 23, Rich Lerman. Lerman gutters it to the right. I think he thought about that a little bit too much. If you'd asked me, I would have said just take the easy way out and play the wood on the left on the red line. But let's see on the retry for the 10 box if he gets it again. Will he play the wood? He won't play the wood. He'll just take 1 out of the 2 pins for a 9 box, putting him at 53 and 5 to conclude the first half of the third game for Richard Lerman. For a 2.5 game total of 259 versus Bryan Hebert's 2.5 game total of 233. It's still anyone's game in terms of the total, but Richard Lerman does have 4 points so far after taking the first game by 2 and the second game by a little bit more than that. Bryan Hebert wasting no time on lane 24, punching out that right side half Worcester, rushing the 3 and 9 pins out the door into the void, into the abyss out back. Now for the spare. What will he get? Right in the pocket. It's looking good. It was a good offer. Taking out all but the 2 and the 4 pins on the deck for Bryan Hebert. Bet he wishes that was his first ball, but he's going to be taking 8. He's going to take an 8 box in the 6 for 49 after 6. 49 after 6 for Hebert. Bryan Hebert bowled with me at Lakeside Lanes in the Thanksgiving Doubles Tournament. He bowled, I'd say, a fair amount better than me in some games. I had a pretty good 1st and 5th game, but I kind of fell apart in the middle. Bryan Hebert dropping 7, the 6, 9, and 10 left on the deck. Taking out just the 9 pin, leaving the 6 and the 10. Bryan once threw a 4-bagger, but it didn't count for anything. He threw it during warm-ups at the Wednesday night mixed league at Leda Lanes, after he was taunted to do so by his teammate Daniel Lang. As he takes a 9 box in the 7th for 58 and 7. He threw the four-bagger, amazed his teammate, but he realized it was worthless as it wasn't during normal league play, as he contemplated life under the crushing laughs of his teammate. But he did throw a four-bagger, it just was in practice. Hebert missing the head pin to the right, taking out only the 10 pin. Again, I feel like I've repeated that statement multiple times for both bowlers tonight. Bryan Hebert taking out just a couple more pins on the right side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 pins left on the deck. 4 down, 6 up. Bryan Hebert for the 10 box. Ooh, that ball careened to the right just a little bit. That's going to be, I think, a 4 box. That's going to be a 4 box for Hebert for 62 in 8. No marks so far to speak of for Bryan Hebert here in the third game. He's definitely going to have to get something started here for sure. Bryan is a secondary manufacturing lead at Microspec Corporation, which produces medical tubing and focuses on extrusion technologies. That could be a strike for Bryan, a slow-moving strike with the 2-pin falling last and taking his time falling. That's a 72 after 9 open for Bryan Hebert. He definitely needed that. I don't know if you heard me when I said no marks in the third. I was like, come on, Bryan, get it together. Here's his first mark of the third game with a strike, open 72 in 9, plus 2 balls. Bryan manages a team of folks at Microspec who help produce the extrusion technology parts and medical tubing and such. So next time you're hooked to something medical, see if it consists of Microspec parts. Bryan for the fill on the strike. Well, that's certainly the start of a fill. That's 3 down so far for the first ball. Putting that 75. See if you can get a couple more for the road. That's going to be 5 more. I thought it was only going to be like 2 more, but some backdoor action knocked out everything but the 1 and the 2 pins for 80 and 9. Concluding his 10 box with an 8 box. That's going to be 88. 88 for Hebert to conclude his third game for a 3-game total of 280. And that will be it for Bryan Hebert in the third. Rich Lerman sitting at a 2.5 game total of 259. With a 53 half, he just has to get to 88. Richard Lerman, home lanes, Leda lanes, Nashua, New Hampshire. Lives in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Just a short drive up to Nashua. Richard Lerman dropping 5 in his opening ball, lane 24, to start out the 6th frame. Taking 2 for the road. That's a 1 and the 9 pins left on the deck for Richard Lerman. Lerman overthrows that a little bit. I think he knew what he did the second he released that ball. That's going to be an 8 box for Lerman for 61 in 6. If you're just tuning in, hey, welcome to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is a Class D North between away bowler Bryan Hebert Jr. sitting down on the bench there against Richard Lerman, our home bowler. We are at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. Appreciate having you along, as always. These bowlers bowl 5 strings of Candlepin bowling, in which points are awarded to the victor of each string, as well as additional points awarded to the bowler who takes total out of 14 available points. Richard Lerman just chopping wood, just taking out incremental chunks here for a 7 box for 68 in 7 for Mr. Lerman. 68 and 7 compared to Bryan Hebert's 58 and 7 at the same point in the game. Only needs a few more to get to the 88 to tie. Anything higher than 88 will be 2 points and also a contribution towards the total. Richard Lerman right in the pocket. Nice explosion of pins, leaving all but the 10 pin. Leaving all but the 10 pin for a spare opportunity. Let's see what Rich Lerman can cook up on lane 24. I think he made a bit of a mistake on the release there. He kind of just sailed the ball mostly through the middle of the lane. So it's going to be a 9 or a 10 box for Rich Lerman. It's going to be a 9 box, same kind of result for the third ball. That puts him at 77 after 8. 77 after 8 for Mr. Lerman. Compare that to Bryan Hebert's 62 after 8. So at this point, he is on track to get to that 88. But Lerman, like Hebert, has been having trouble finding marks today and having trouble finding the head pin. He does hit the pocket this time, leaving the 6, the 7, and the 9 pins on the deck with no wood, though. No wood on this shot. Nothing to help him. This is going to be a difficult shot to hit. But will he get it? Oh, my goodness. He almost got it. He took out the 6 and the 9 pins, leaving the 7. That was an impressive shot. If that flying wood had gone any more favorably, I think that would have definitely gone. Lerman for the 10 box. He's going to ricochet off of a piece of wood in the gutter for a 9 box for 86 and 9. And he needs just 2 to tie and 3 or higher to take everything. Lerman, lane 24 for the win for the game. That is 3 pins, so he has taken game 3 officially. The rest are just bonus at this point. He takes out a few more, leaving 3 on the deck, 7 down, 3 up. 7 down, 3 up for 86. Well, he has 86 and 9 plus at least 93 at this point. For the 10 box, he's going to take a 9 box. That's going to be 95 to conclude the 3rd game for Richard Lerman for a 3-game total of 301 for Rich Lerman. Slightly north of a 100 average versus Bryan Hebert's 3-game total of 280. That concludes the 3rd game. Rich Lerman so far taking everything. He has 6 points to speak of up to this point. And he's on track for taking total as well. Total is 4 additional points by the end of the match for a possible 14 points if he shuts Bryan Hebert out. But still plenty of bowling here to go, folks. We still got 2 more games to go and 4 more points up for grabs. Technically 8 points up for grabs if we really factor in the total. Bryan could really have a blockbuster last 2 games and definitely swing the tide in terms of points to give him something going home. But we'll start off with the 4th game here. 4th out of 5. Leda lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Lane 23, Bryan Hebert leading off. His opening ball is more than 5. It's a 6 drop. That's going to be a 1, 3, 6, and 9 pins with a sleeper behind the 1, 3, and the 6. Pocket shot should take this out as long as he doesn't hit too full or doesn't throw it too hard. Let's see. Ooh, boy, it looks like he's going to throw the ball a little bit too much to the right. I think he spent a lot of time not crossing his body and threw the ball to the right a bit too much. Lane 23 for the 10 box. He's going to take 1 more out for the road, leaving the 1 and the 9 pin on the deck for an 8 box. Leaving the 1 and the 9 pin on the deck for an 8 box. Bryan Hebert. If you're just tuning in, welcome to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This is Class D North. We're in the 4th game out of 5. And thanks as always for checking out these streams. Everyone involved here, from the bowlers bowling in front of you to the staff you can't see around you, Dave Simino at the desk, the increasing number of people standing around me and sitting around me. Everyone appreciates your viewership and interest in this live stream, as well as Candlepin bowling as a whole. We're at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. Bryan Hebert with 7 on the deck. After 2, it's going to be another 8 box, the second 8 box in a row for Bryan Hebert for 16 after 2 in the 4th game here. Richard Lerman has yet to bowl, but he will after Bryan Hebert concludes 5 boxes here. Bryan Hebert, lane 23. Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Leda Lanes has a fully stocked bar and restaurant known as Kegler's Den. It's the right kind of bar with tons of TVs. There's karaoke. There's a room for poker. There's, it's a really cozy bar. I think if I could describe it, it's really cozy, and I know personally I have a lot of memories with it because there used to be pizza parties in there when we were in the bumper leagues with the trophy ceremonies and all of that. My current Facebook profile picture is a photo from those times. That's going to be Bryan Hebert's 3rd 8 box in a row for 24 after 3. Not much to speak of in terms of marks or activity at the moment for Bryan. I'll let let you know when something happens. Bryan dropping 2 on the left. That's going to be the 4 and the 7 pins down. I'd say each side of the building at Leda Lanes is a slightly different personality and feel to it. Lanes 1 through 18, I think, are a little bit tougher overall, although Dave Simino does claim that lanes 9 and 10 are the highest scoring in the house. It seems to be feast or famine for me when I bowl on those lanes, at least, in most cases. Bryan Hebert's 4th 8-box in a row for 32 after 4. He's making this really easy for me. If I don't know what he got, I just he probably got an 8, and he's gotten 4 8s so far in this 4th game. Lanes 33 and 34, of course, are famous for being the lanes featured during the tapings for WNDS's Candlepin Stars and Strikes on TV 50 in the late 90s and early 2000s after the show transitioned away from the late Park Place lanes in Windham, New Hampshire. As Bryan Hebert going for a spare and caps a piece of wood, takes out the 5, leaves the 8. Heartbreaker for Bryan Hebert right there. But hey, it's not going to be an 8-box. It's going to be at least a 9-box. And it's going to be more than that. It's going to be a 10-box for him to sit on a 42 half after 5 for Bryan Hebert. Bit of a sleepy 42 half. Fishing for marks, cruising for burgers, but there seems to be no burgers or marks to be had so far for Bryan Hebert. That's the 4th game here. Richard Lerman starting out on lane 23 now. Lerman himself also having some trouble finding marks as well with his 98 second game and 95 third game. For both bowlers, the most explosive game was the first game so far, so if you're watching this stream live and you want to go back and watch the first game to see a whole lot of marks, these bowlers were bowling a ton of marks then. Since then, it's been a little bit quiet since then, so Lerman is dropping 5 on the first ball on lane 23, the third 20 lane at Leda Lanes. Dropping 5, 4 horseman right side plus a sleeper pin, 5 pin. He takes out all but the 1 and the 10 pins on the second ball, leaving the 1 and the 10 for a 10-box, 8, 9, or 10 for Richard Lerman opportunity here. It's going to be an 8-box after 1 for Rich Lerman. And of course, you've probably heard him over the loudspeaker maybe a few times here tonight, but it just wouldn't be a league at Leda Lanes without Dave Simino on the microphone going, "Attention bowlers, please finish your warm-up frames. We'll be changing to scoring in just a moment." Richard Lerman taking 7 pins out, the 5, the 3, and the 10 pins. The 5 pin falling late. 5 pin falling late. That's a foible of the Cubica AMF automatic scoring system. The scanner doesn't expect a late falling pin because it's technically designed for a 10 pin bowling system. That's a spare for Richard Lerman in the second. 18 open after 2. Finally a spare. Something to talk about. A mark for Richard Lerman. 18 after 2 for Lerman thus far. So Leda Lanes has a bar called Kegler's Den, which offers an impressive number of taps, drinks, food, entertainment, karaoke, and plenty of other events. And Richard Lerman, oops, sorry, I didn't have the switcher on the camera. That's 8 fill for Rich Lerman, leaving the 9 and the 10 pins. 9 and the 10 with some interesting wood opportunity here. I would say, I would hazard maybe left side cap that piece of wood perpendicular to the 9 pin, but that doesn't happen. He just hits one of the pieces of wood in the back and doesn't really get anything else. Doesn't connect with either the 9 or the 10. There's a piece of wood there that I think he's going to have to play if he wants to get a 10 box at this point. Redline that piece of wood or just take out the 9 pin, whichever floats your boat, Rich. That's going to be a 9 box for Rich for 35 and 3 after that 8 fill in the spare. 35 and 3 versus Bryan Hebert's 24 after 3 at the same point in the game. Eric Vadney was one of the bartenders at Leda Lanes at Kegler's Den, and unfortunately he passed away on July 2nd of 2023. He worked at Leda Lanes for 15 years. Eric was an amazing guy. He usually knew you, like before you even saw him. He kind of knew where you were before you knew where he was. Sometimes he even knew what you wanted. He would peel around the front desk, say hi to you. But unfortunately, Eric passed away on July 2nd of 2023. Miss him a lot. Big lobster guy. There's a memorial for him in Kegler's Den. There's a little lobster behind the front cash register in the bar. When you're in there, just kind of, just think of Eric when you're in there, because Eric put his heart and soul into bartending at Leda Lanes. And it looks like that was a 9 box for Rich Lerman. My apologies for missing that. It's 9 box after 4. Opening ball, the fifth box for Richard Lerman is an 8 drop, leaving the 6 and the 10 pins with favorable wood for a spare opportunity that he can possibly sit on. Maybe it'll be an open 54 if he can. Ooh, piece of wood. He wanted to play that piece of wood, but he just missed it by maybe an inch and a half. Candlepin is a game of inches, and he misses it again just for good measure. That's going to be an 8 box for Richard Lerman. That's a 52 half for Richard Lerman versus Bryan Hebert's 42. So the difference is only 10 after 5 frames. Here, Leda lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Bryan Hebert, lane 24, to start out his second half of the 4th game. Let's see if he has a better half than the first time around. So Bryan Hebert sits at 322 after 3.5 games. Richard Lerman sits at 353 after 3.5 games. Your score update. So let's talk about the wall next to lane 19 at Leda Lanes in particular. We're not near it, and it's not visible in the camera here, but, well, actually, you can sort of see it. You can see half of this wall, but I'm not going to talk about that part of the wall you can see. So my dad recalls a story in which Sean Howard told him around sometime in the 90s. That's a 9 box for Bryan, by the way, 51 and 6. In the 90s or 2000s, at some point, Sean Howard had to install some kind of barrier material between the carpeting over the brick wall behind it due to an influx of bowlers attempting to punch the wall in rage and then hurting their hand. It's kind of a funny thing you have to do based on player behavior. You know, Candlepin bowling, you can sometimes, things can get a little heated from time to time, and it's just, you know, really funny how that had to be done, but hey, you know, whatever works, works. So Bryan, wow, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 3 down so far? Yeah, that's 3 pins down. Sorry, it took me a minute to even figure out how many pins were even on the deck. And the automatic scoring system got it wrong, too. That looks like it's going to be a 6 box for Mr. Hebert, putting him at 57 after 7 for Mr. Hebert. Leda Lanes is located what used to be called the Kahala Chinese Restaurant, and later the Grand Buffet, which is now gone. The building has literally been demolished. There's a new development that will be going in. I think probably like a little mini shopping plaza that will be going in there soon, similar to across the street. The Kahala was often advertised during the WNDS Stars and Strikes show. That is a spare for Bryan Hebert. Finally, a spare that he's been looking for all game and most of last game. That's 67 and 8, and that 67 is open for Bryan Hebert. He can salvage this game, get over average, maybe get a good fill, and maybe another mark. Here we go, Bryan Hebert filling a spare, and ooh, that ball spun. That ball spun hard. That ball did not want to hit the head pin. That's a 1 fill for Bryan Hebert. A painful, painful 1 fill. The theme of tonight for Bryan is he's been missing to the right. So, Bryan, if you're watching this later for review or pointers, think about those wide right misses. Those Nick Folk misses. Not Nick Folk, or whoever the current kicker of the Patriots is that misses a lot. That's a 7 box for Bryan Hebert in the 9th for 75 and 9. 75 and 9 for Bryan Hebert after a disappointing spare with a 1 fill. But hey, he could get 3 strikes. You know, 3 strikes will definitely get him right back in this game. Leda Lanes hosts many large tournaments throughout the year, including Luck of the Irish, Halloween Scramble, and of course, Ray's Easter Classic, which is coming up here in a few months. That of which is a 20-game tournament that brings out the best bowlers from both the U.S. and Canada for a huge Easter Sunday Super Bowl. I usually bowl in it too, so if you want to see me bowl there, I'll be there. Bryan with an awkward array of pins. He missed the spare on this 1, 7, 8, and 6 pin split. It's going to be a 7 box to conclude his 10th game for 82 and 10 for Bryan Hebert. Seemed to be on a bit of a downward trajectory here, unfortunately. The only mark he got was a spare 1 in the 8th. Everything else was within a 6 and 10 box range for Bryan, unfortunately. Bit of an off night for him. Rich Lerman, who had a 52 half, is working on getting to 82 or better to secure points for this game. Rich Lerman has taken every game so far up to this point. And we're now going to see what Rich Lerman can cook up. Our home bowler, Leda Lanes, our divisional leader, who leads D North Division II ahead of Chris Gurley, Paul Kravitz, and Ed Sargent as of January 15th. Rich Lerman, lane 24, missing the headpin to the right, dropping several pins. I say several because it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 pins on the deck, dropping 4. The 4 horsemen left side with 2 sleeper pins, the 5 and the 8 behind the 1, 2, and the 4 and the 7 pins. No wood to help them. Second ball is a miss. Third ball just barely kisses the head pin to sleep, and that will be a 5 box for Rich Lerman. Somewhat surprising 5 box for Rich Lerman for 57 in 6 here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Lerman, our home bowler. Home lanes here at Leda Lanes. That's almost a strike for Rich. Slow moving. Was almost a 5-7 setback, but a piece of wood took out the 5 pin. Let's see if he can get the spare. This is for a spare. That's going to be a spare for Rich. I was worried if that ball was going to just maybe sail a little bit too much to the left into the gutter, but it didn't do that. So he has 67 in 7, and that 67 is open for Richard Lerman here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. 2 marks in the game for Rich Lerman so far. Filling that spare with, on the head pin, 5, 6, and 10. It's going to be a 7 fill for Rich Lerman. It's going to be an odd shot to make. I'm not quite sure what is the best option. Probably the wood on the right side, but the way you hit it is going to make all the difference. You could attempt to play the 5 pin on the left side, but that's going to be a really specific shot. He's going to try the former, and that's going to be a spare. He got it precisely the way I was theorizing he was going to get, but it was still a difficult shot nonetheless. Either scenario, that's an open 84 in 8 for Rich Lerman now. He's got this game in the bag for sure now, and he's only in the 8th frame. Just adding on to the total now. Filling the spare with, oh goodness, that's a left side half Worcester 2 fill, taking out the 2 and the 8 pins. 86 after 8 for Rich Lerman now. For the spare. And it's not going to be a spare. He's going to take out a few more. 6 down, 4 up. 1 pin, 4 pin, 7 pin, and 9 pin. Lane 24. It's going to be a 7 box for Rich Lerman now. 93 and 9 for Mr. Lerman. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. This Class D North match between away bowler Bryan Hebert and home bowler Richard Lerman. We are just about to conclude the 4th game. Just 1 frame to go with Richard Lerman, who has taken the 4th game. He's taken every game tonight so far. The bowler currently bowling up on lane 24 there. Rich Lerman dropping 5 with the 4 horsemen left side plus the 10 pins. The 1, the 2, the 4, the 7, and the 10 pins. Rich Lerman is going for a spare now. Will he get his 4th spare of the game? He'll certainly try, but he'll leave the 4 and the 10 pins with no wood on the deck. 8, 9, or 10 now for Rich Lerman. It'll be over 100 regardless. It's going to be an 8 box for 101 to conclude his 4th game. 4 game total for Richard Lerman of 402. Again, just a little bit north of a 100 average for the night versus Bryan Hebert's 4 game total of 362. Your score update here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. We have 1 game to go. Bryan Hebert is fighting for any points at this point. He has taken 0 so far against Richard Lerman's 6 and counting. Potential for 4 more if he maintains the total of 40 for the game. So if Bryan can best Lerman by 41 as well as keep pace with him for the 5th game, he can at least take 4 points, but it's getting increasingly more difficult as we go on here. But we are going to move forward to the 5th game as our bowlers reconfigure their electronic scoreboard down there for the 5th game, as I reconfigure my electronic scoreboard for the 5th game back here as we eagerly await the commencement of the 5th game. Here's some stats for Bryan Hebert, who is 9th in Class D North Division 4. 12 strikes, 80 spares. Spares are his specialty, 67 tens. Here's Rich Lerman, whose specialty appears to be 10 boxes, believe it or not, with 25 strikes, though. That's a superlative for the division. And if we talk about the ACST match format, in case you forgot, this is a 5-string head-to-head match. The bowlers bowl for standings points, so it's a slow marathon to the playoffs. It's a lot like the NFL, but a lot more games than the NFL. For every string you win out of the 5 in each match, you take 2 points. For the total, you take 4. If you sweep a bowler, it's hard to do, but if you do sweep a bowler, it's 14 points per match. It can be done. I've done it at least once this season so far. I've also, I think, taken as little as 2 points in a match. Can swing either way. 18-match season, top 8 make the playoffs. Tonight it is Bryan Hebert versus Richard Lerman. This is week 10 for them in D North at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. And it looks like I've stalled long enough for the bowlers to start game 5 here. Lane 23 for Bryan Hebert. Bryan Hebert with something to prove. Definitely the underdog tonight, not only in terms of overall standing, but just in the match tonight. Bryan Hebert is fighting for any points. Bryan Hebert 60 and 66 for the season. My apologies, I think I just realized I might have said he has a positive record earlier, and no, 60 is less than 66, so... Hey, you passed me. Do the math. Bryan Hebert's dropped 5 so far. For a spare, he's going to miss wide right again. The same 5 pins remain on the deck. It's the one... No, it's just a 5 box in total. My apologies. 5 box for Bryan Hebert to start out the 5th game. Not the greatest way to start that out, but hey, still plenty of boxes to go here. Let's see what Bryan can do. Bryan missing wide left. I don't think we've seen a lot of scenarios tonight where he's hit only the 7 pin. He's had issues where he's only collided with the 10 pin. Taking out a few more, closer to the head pin, but not quite the head pin territory here. 6 up, 4 down on lane 23 for Bryan Hebert. I hope I didn't jinx him. I bowled a 409 triple here the other night, and I told him, hey, the pins are falling at Leda, and my goodness, I hope I didn't get into his head on that one. That's going to be a 4 box for Bryan. Wow. Poor guy's just struggling tonight. That's 9 after 2. My goodness, 9 after 2. Hey, it's better than 8 after 2. It's better than 7 after 2. I'm trying to keep the mood lightened as much as I possibly can. Bryan Hebert's opening ball of the 3rd box of the 5th game is 5+. It's going to be 6. 6 drop. It's a makeable spare. You can do it. 1-2 pocket. We'll take it out. Full shot on the 1-2 pocket. And we're just going to dink the piece of wood behind it. So definitely a 3-ball spare opportunity now. The 1, the 2, the 9, and the 10 on lane 23 for Bryan Hebert. Will he connect? He'll get everything but the head pin, just missing the head pin by just a little bit for a 9 box. To double his score to 18 after 3 from 9 after 2. For Mr. Hebert. 2nd highest average in D class. D North, I believe. Oh, here we go. Here's a strike for Bryan Hebert. Look at that. 28 after 4 for Bryan Hebert. That 28 is open after that strike. That surprise strike. That was a fast hammer. At least in terms of me realizing what had even happened. Those pins definitely fell. Lane 23 is just pausing for a pin load reset. Bryan Hebert is 3rd in D North Division 4, ahead of Kevin Martell and trailing Bill Olson and Jonathan Hogan. His high single is 127. His high series is 529. Bryan Hebert now filling a strike. Filling a strike with 3+, the 5-pin wiggling. It's going to be 3 so far. It's okay, that's why you get 2. 3 on the first ball. See what he gets for the 2nd. Is that going to be a spare? 5 in the 10 pins. That's going to be an 8 fill total for 36 after 4 for Bryan Hebert. And now for the 10 box. It's going to be a 9 box. We'll get halfway there for 45 and 5, somewhat salvaging that scary starter for the first half. 45 half for Bryan Hebert. Could definitely have used a few extra pins, but it was definitely digging him out of disaster territory with that 5 and 4 opener. That strike with the 8 fill definitely saving it a little bit for him. Richard Lerman's going to start out on lane 23 now. Richard Lerman, 23. His home lanes are Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. Originally from Malden, Mass. Lives in Tewksbury, Massachusetts. Graduate of Suffolk University in finance. Richard Lerman, your financial man on lane 23. On the head pin, dropping 9. The 5-pin goes late. Not the 7-pin. All that's standing. And it looks like that piece of wood appears to be in play. It's just colored a little bit differently based on its position, its Z-axis positioning there. Rich Lerman versus the 7-pin for a spare. He's going to miss it. I think he thought a little bit too much about not getting the ball in the gutter there or hitting a piece of wood. Rich Lerman for the 3-ball spare now. That's going to be a 10-box for Richard Lerman. We call that the 3-ball spare, the Paul Grant special. When you miss the second and get the third. Be sure to like and subscribe for more silly facts about Candlepin bowling. Rich Lerman, lane 23. Missing the head pin to the right, taking out the 3, 6, 9, and 10 by the looks of it. For a spare, he just has to get the 1-2 pocket just full enough to take out the 5 and the 8, but also spread enough to get the 4 and the 7, but that scenario just isn't going to happen. The 1, the 5, and the 8 pin left on the deck for Rich Lerman. This is a kind of shot where you have to hit the head pin and get it to dance around to come get the 5 and the 8 pin after school. Just the 5 and the 8 pin. That's going to be an 8-box for Rich Lerman, connecting with the head pin but not hitting it towards either remaining pins. That's 18 after 2 for Mr. Lerman. Compare that to 9 after 2 for Bryan Hebert, doubling his score at the same point in the match. Lerman, lane 23. Almost seemed like he threw that ball away, but he got way more than I think he bargained for, leaving the 1, the 8, and the 9. This shot can be deceptive. Sometimes it goes when you don't think it's going to go, and sometimes it doesn't go when you think it will go. And that did not go. Hit a piece of wood, taking out the 8 and the 9, leaving only the head pin. Rich Lerman versus the head pin. Rich Lerman versus the 1. Will he get it? Nope, the 1 pin will stand for a 9-box. That's going to be 27 after 3 for Rich Lerman. Compare that to Bryan Hebert's 18 after 3, but at this point, Bryan gets a strike, so Rich Lerman needs to get to at least 45 and 5 to make pace against Bryan Hebert. Lerman missing to the left, taking out 2 pins, the 4 and the 7. For a spare now. I think he threw that ball away, and I think he knew it based on that facial expression. He's left with the diamond center plus the 8 pin, the 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8. Taking out 2 for the road. Surprising 2 more for the road. I thought it was just going to be 1. That's going to be an 8-box for 35 and 4 for Rich Lerman. You're on the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. If you're just tuning in, welcome. Thanks for checking out this Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match between away bowler Bryan Hebert versus home bowler Richard Lerman in the D North class on this January 17, 2024 at Leda Lanes, live streamed and available for viewing anytime afterwards on demand. Wherever it is you get your Candlepin bowling content. Richard Lerman taking out the 4 horseman right side, but not getting the sleeper 8 pin for the spare. He's looking at a 9 or a 10 box now to sit on a possible 45 to match Bryan Hebert's 45. And he will not. He will get a 44 half. So believe it or not, despite Bryan's disastrous start, he actually comes out on top in this first half by 1 specifically. So Bryan holds on to a lead, I think for the first time in, if not quite a while, for the entire match as far as I know. Game lead of 1 for Bryan Hebert. Lane 24 now, Bryan Hebert. Missing the 1-3 pocket by just centimeters. He takes out 6. The 1, the 2, the 6, and the 10 left on the deck. Lane 24 for the spare. Again, just missing the head pin. He's really having trouble finding that head pin tonight. He's getting closer, but he's still not quite landing it. And it's going to be a 9-box for Bryan Hebert, leaving only the head pin on the deck. That's 54 in 6 for Bryan Hebert at this point. If you live in the area and are willing to make the pilgrimage, the Candlepin bowling community, hey, myself included, would absolutely appreciate your interest and visitation. Check out candlepin.org to figure out where your nearest bowling center is. Click Go Bowling to find your nearest center, your nearest Candlepin center, if you want to give this unique regional sport a try. If you're in Nashua, New Hampshire, Leda Lanes is the place. If you're in Manchester, there's Lakeside Lanes. If you're kind of in the UNH Durham area, I would recommend Exeter Bowling Lanes or Portsmouth Bowlorama. If you're Down in the Salem-Peabody area, there's Metro Bowl with its wacky lanes that sometimes have some trouble with the flooding based on the street it's on. But, you know, you get what you get. Bryan, by the way, getting what you get, he drops 2-3-9 right side half Worcester. And now for the spare attempt, he gets a few more. 5 up, 5 down. That's 2, 4, 5, 6, and 10 on the deck. And oof, wow. Well, that's a very awkward 6 box, a hard-fought 6 box he definitely went to war for. I've never seen someone fight so hard for a box that's so mediocre. 60 after 7 for Bryan Hebert in the second half of the 5th and final game here at the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour. Bryan Hebert, lane 24, and another punch out directly out the center. That's a spread eagle. The 1, the 5, and the 9 pin, by the looks of it, didn't even get the 8 pin out of it. Takes out the right half, leaving the 2, the 4, the 7, and the 8. 2, the 4, the 7, and the 8 for Bryan Hebert. Will he get the rest? He'll get a 9 box for 69 in 8. Nice. 69 and 8 for Bryan Hebert in the 5th game with 2 to go. 1 mark so far. Had some trouble getting things started and had some unfortunate 5, 4, and 6 boxes up to this point. Lane 24's first drop is a miss off the right side of the head pin. 4 horsemen left side plus the 10 pin left on the deck for a spare opportunity. Let's see what Bryan Hebert can come up with. Needs to hit the pocket. Left with the high-low jack, the 1, the 7, and the 10, with a piece of wood perpendicular to the 7 pin. High-low jack is always a pretty shot if you can land it. The 1 is down, the 7 is down. He gets 66% of the way to a high-low jack completion. That's going to be 78 after 9 for Bryan Hebert. With 1 to go. 1 to go. He has a 4.9 game total of 440 so far. Opening ball is another head pin miss. 6 drop, 1, 2, 4, and 10 pins on lane 24. Bryan Hebert for the spare. Off the head pin just a little bit again, leaving the 1 and the 10 pins now. 8, 9, or 10, so it's a possible 88 best case scenario, 86 worst case scenario, as we wait for a ball to come back from the somewhat slow ball return tonight at Leda Lanes on lanes 23 and 24. Bryan Hebert, 8, 9, or 10 now. 1 in the 10 pins. It's going to be an 8 box for an 86 for a 5 game total for Bryan Hebert tonight, 448. That will be all she wrote for Bryan Hebert tonight. Rich Lerman has to get to 86 or higher to tie or win to take all 5 games. Needless to say, I think he has the total at this point. Bryan only up by 2, even with 5 additional boxes, so I think it's safe to say we might be looking at a blanking tonight. Richard Lerman might be taking all 14 by the looks of it. But we'll see. We'll see what happens here. Richard Lerman's opening ball of the 6th frame in the second half of the final game tonight is a 6 drop, leaving the 1, the 3, the 6, and the 5 pins. Rich Lerman, that ball slips out of his hand. Excuse me, the 1, the 3, and the 9 pin. It was 1, 3, 6, 9. 6 is down now. 1, 3, and the 9 pin is left on the deck. And Rich Lerman will take an 8 box, punching out the 3 pin. I gotta say, I love this pin diagram on the wall at Leda Lanes. You can't quite see it. It's slightly out of frame, but on the left is a big pin diagram on the wall, and I love using this thing when I'm here at Leda Lanes because I can identify pins a lot faster than trying to mentally do the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in my head. Rich Lerman, lane 24 on the head pin this time. A little bit too full, though, but has a favorable 7 drop. 2, 4, 10 split. No wood, except for the piece of wood on the 10, but it's not super helpful. For spares, connects full on the 2 pin, leaving everything else. 8, 9, or 10 box now for Richard Lerman. Let's see if he can get 1 or 2 more. It's going to be an 8 box. Sailing through the goalposts of the uneven 4 and the 10 pin sticks for 60 and 7 for Rich Lerman now at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. This is the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour, a season-long series of one-on-one Candlepin bowling matches between challengers organized in the classes and divisions, competing for playoff contention. Everybody involved here, thanks you for watching. If this is your first time watching such a match, hey, I'm glad you've stuck around, and I hope you stick around for more for sure. If you're a returning viewer, as always, we appreciate you watching. Rich Lerman's second ball, dropping all but the 10-pin. It's going to be a 10 box for a 70 and 8. 70 and 8 for Rich Lerman versus Bryan Hebert's 69 and 8 at the same point in the game. Rich Lerman on track for taking the final 2 points of the fifth game. And I think it's probably safe to say, as we get closer and closer, it's going to be very difficult for him to not secure all the points at this point. Very impressive night for Rich Lerman, albeit a little bit under average for his normal 103 average for the season up to this point. Second best in D class. Rich Lerman missing that. He dropped 4 in his first ball, and he had a really awkward miss to the left. Could be just fatigue settling in, but was what it was. The 1, the 2, the 3, the 8, the 5, and the 6 pins, I believe, are still on the deck. That's going to be a 6 box for Rich Lerman. 76 in 9 for Mr. Lerman. With 1 to go, he needs 10 to tie Bryan Hebert. Let's see if he can do it. See if he can take 13 points if he gets a 10 box. What's it going to be, Rich Lerman? He's going to drop 6. 3, 6, 10, 7 on lane 24. Ooh, this is going to get interesting now. That's an 7, 10 split. That's 8, 9, or 10. Oh, I don't know if he's going to get this now. Let's see what he does. That's a 9 ball. I think Bryan's going to take some points. Bryan takes points because he's down by 1. He does not blank Bryan. Bryan takes 2 points. He's going to come home with 2 points. He's not going to say he got shut out. He wins the 5th game by 1 pin. 1 freaking pin. So Rich Lerman's 5-game total is 487. Bryan Hebert's 5-game total is 448. Let's kick it down for some additional stats here. So Bryan Hebert will go home with 2 points tonight, taking the 5th game by 1. By 1. He will go from 60 and 68. He will go from 60 and 66 win-loss to 62 and 78. Meanwhile, Richard Lerman will go from 96 and 30 to 108 and 32, taking all but the 5th game for 12 points tonight, with 3 strikes, 4 spares, and 2 10s for Bryan Hebert, 0 strikes, 8 spares, and 7 10s for Richard Lerman. And that should just about do it for us at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire. If you're new to the world of Candlepin bowling content, thanks for giving this content a try. And if you enjoyed what you saw, I invite you to strike, comment, and subscribe to the Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour page on Facebook, as well as Alley Chat, Candlepin Corner, and Candlepin Bowling Network, where all kinds of other videos and streams are regularly posted, in addition to results and statistics. If you're a returning viewer, it's great to have had you along once again, and hope you enjoyed this program. If you are into podcasts, there's also Candlepin shows such as The Approach and Ripping the Rack, so check those out if you feel so inclined. I've been Steve Kelly, along with Richard Lerman and Bryan Hebert here at Leda Lanes in Nashua, New Hampshire tonight. Your final score for the final time: Bryan Hebert with 2 points with a 5-game total of 448 versus Richard Lerman taking 12 points for a 5-game total of 487. Hope you folks have a fantastic day and the rest of your week and everything else, and we will see you at the next Atlantic Candlepin Singles Tour match. Have a great night, everybody.